What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. YouTube on this Monday after week 6. A lot to talk about. This episode is where we talk about everything that happened on Sunday, everything that is going to affect your fantasy team going into week 7. So we're reviewing everything from week 6. We're going to preview tonight's Monday Night Football game. Zach, what's up? I'm Faraz Siddiqui, by the way. This is Zach Rizzuto. Zach, how's it going, man? How you feeling on this Monday?
Not as good as other Mondays. Let's just put it that way. I got my fantasy teams losing. I got my Cowboys losing. Could be going better, to say the least. I still have an outside shot at winning tonight, but I need a lot of stuff to go right for me.
Can you explain? So obviously, if you listened to the podcast last week, you know that Zach and I are going against each other in one of our leagues. The league is called The Only League That Matters. And Zach, can you please explain what you need tonight in order for you to pull off the victory?
So it's looking like I'm going to need, what is 39, pretty much 40 plus 16, 56-ish combined points. Yeah, just about 56 combined points between Justin Herbert and Courtland Sutton. Light work. That's all I need to win.
Light work. And I think you have a chance, dude.
You're just saying that in hopes that you can jinx it, I'm sure.
No, you know what it is? Like, I was looking at these matchups, and I like Courtland Sutton a lot tonight.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that. A little bit of a tough matchup for Justin Herbert, but it's Justin Herbert, right? Like, you never know when he's just going to go off, right?
He hasn't had that game yet, which is what I'm kind of crossing my fingers for,
See, that's not what I wanted to hear. I didn't want to hear that. Because you're right, though. It's like, part of the reason why, I did rank Geno Smith above Justin Herbert. That's not looking so good right now. Geno Smith not throwing any touchdowns in that game. That whole game was just very interesting, but we'll get into all that. But yeah, man, listen, I started 0-3 in that league, but making my way to 500, feeling good. I'm feeling good. And I have guys banged up, man. You know what I'm saying? So I'm feeling all right. I did Rhamondre Stevenson definitely helped me out. Drafting him in a couple leagues definitely helped me out in those. Hopefully he'll be able to help me out again next Monday night. I think the Patriots are playing the Broncos. No, not the Broncos. Who are they playing? They're playing some not so.
Patriots.
The Bears on Monday night.
Yeah, the Bears.
Which doesn't seem like a fun game to watch. Unless Rhamondre Stevenson tearing it up, then it'll be fun for me. But otherwise, not really.
How did they end up with those games in the primetime slots? Like, it makes no sense.
Well, you know what? Maybe the NFL thought that Justin Fields was going to be, maybe taking a step forward.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Maybe they're just getting those, crappy primetime games out of the way. You know how they say, like, every team gets some sort of primetime game. Get them out of the way early in the season when it doesn't matter. Later on we'll have the consequential games. That might be it.
I'm also feeling kind of good about. I'm going to say my Jets now. Like, now that they're 4-2, I'm going to call them my Jets. They look pretty good, man. It's funny, after going 0-2, Robert Saleh was like, "Hey, man, I'm keeping all the receipts," and it was kind of ballsy of him to kind of come out in the media like that, because it could have backfired. And the New York media is ruthless, when it comes to stuff like that. And he put it on the line, and now the Jets are 4-2, and they beat the Packers. Now they're third in the AFC in record, which is insane. They're right behind. They're one game behind the Bills in the division. There's no way they can win that. But it's crazy. I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. This isn't something that I expect the Jets to continue doing. But their defense is really looking solid, and Quinnen Williams is looking like a beast. Sauce Gardner. The dude is something else. Like, he's a personality for sure, right? Him after the game wearing the cheese head in Lambeau, like, it's he's an interesting character, but he's been killing it. He's the favorite right now for Defensive Rookie of the Year, if you're trying to bet on that. So that's awesome. And Breece Hall on the other side is the favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year. So the Jets are doing pretty well with their first couple of draft picks this year. Garrett Wilson, waiting for him to kind of do his thing, but we'll get there. All right. Yeah. Anyway, we want to talk about, the overall fantasy takeaways and developments, so you can make the best decisions coming out of week 6, going into week 7. I do want to preview tonight's game. We got the Broncos at the Chargers. Russ has been bad this year, but I think he bounces back. against this Chargers secondary. They're giving up 250 passing yards a game. They're giving up 2 touchdowns a game. Wilson was a little bit banged up, right? Coming out of last week's game, but he did practice in full. He was doing okay. So I think Russell Wilson has a chance to bounce back. I thought he would do okay last week, but that game was just terrible. Hoping that he could bounce back this week. I can't imagine him, two primetime games in a row, shit in the bed, right? Now, I do want to look at what's going on over at Underdog for tonight's game. Right now, we have Russell Wilson, at 232.5 passing yards. I'm looking at it. I'm sharing my screen over on YouTube, but I think he goes over that, man. I think he passes for higher than 232.5 passing yards. He did it 3 times this year, including last week. Right, even in a bad game, this is a plus matchup for him. All his receivers are healthy. I think I'm going to add Wilson here to my hire. So I got one entry. I got one in there right now in my entry. Melvin Gordon. I like his line of 73.5 rushing and receiving yards. So that's scrimmage yards. He's a little bit banged up, right? Hoping he can play. If he does suit up, though, I think he can end up going over this number. They've given it the 6th most rushing yards to running backs. The Chargers have. They've given up the most yards per carry, the 12th most receiving yards to running backs this year. And last week, Gordon ran around on nearly 50% of Wilson's dropbacks. So I can see him getting a couple targets too in this game. Preciser, who we're using as our prediction and analytics tool, they're projecting Gordon to be at 93 scrimmage yards for tonight. So that gives me a little bit of confidence too. So I'm going to also add him in here as well. So that makes 2 so far. Courtland Sutton, the receiving yard pick him here is 67.5. He went over, let's see, where's Sutton here? Yes. Oh, 60. It went up. It went up 68.5 now. He went over that in every game this year except one. So, Denver has given up the 8th most fantasy points to perimeter. I'm sorry, the Chargers have given up the 8th most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers this year. And I think Sutton does his thing tonight, so I'm going to add him in here as well. What do you think of the picks so far? Do you think the Melvin Gordon one is a little risky?
Yeah, of all of them, Melvin Gordon is the one that I'm a little iffy on. It could end up being, a heavy passing game, and then maybe Melvin Gordon gets favored in the passing attack, just a couple of dump offs you could get there. But I actually, we've been saying that these could be high-scoring games with the Broncos, and they haven't been. But I think tonight is kind of, where everything lines up. We might have an actual shootout tonight. Hopefully, it doesn't look like last week's debacle on Thursday night that had the Broncos.
Yeah, no, I hear that, man. So let's see. So now if okay, so what do we have? We have Gordon here. We have Sutton here. Now, if I just left it like this, these three pick'ems in this entry would end up 6xing whatever I put in, right? So like $50 would turn into $300 here, right? But let's keep going. I'm looking at Jerry Jeudy's line here at 53.5 receiving yards. I think I'm going to stay away from this one personally. Like, he's been up and down this year. He literally had exactly 53 receiving yards each of the last 2 weeks. So we got KJ Hamler, Eric Sauber. Let's move on to the Chargers. This is a tough matchup, like I said, for the Chargers passing game. Denver has allowed the 5th least passing yards per game at 204 passing yards per game, but it's hard for me to bet against Justin Herbert, right? Like, this over under for him is at 266.5 passing yards. I'm going to leave it alone personally. If you want to add it into yours, you can. You can also choose an over under of 2 passing touchdowns. You can choose an over under of 0.5 interceptions, whether he throws a pick tonight or not. 35.5 passing attempts, over under on that. I'm going to leave all these alone personally. Is there anything that stands out to you?
I like the Justin Herbert over on the yardage. If
you do,
you're not going to be if you're going to be iffy on it. If you wouldn't take it, I mean, I totally would. I look at it. What's the number you said? 266. He's reached that. Yep. Yeah, every week except last week. Where Austin Eckler was just going off. He's reached that relatively safely. The closest he's come to missing it was 279 yards in week 1. Outside of that, it's been 297 plus yards in the other 3 games where he went over that prop right there. So even though it is Denver, I think this is a divisional game. And like I said, if there's going to be offense, which I sincerely hope there will be, Justin Herbert's going to have a problem getting to that point.
Okay, I like that. So now this brings up a point. Now Zach likes it. I'm a little iffy on it. We could potentially add him in and then turn on insurance, right? If you turn on
Right.
insurance, you know, you end up reducing the payout just a little bit, but you have the ability to get one of these wrong. So if Justin Herbert ends up going lower, I can still win. I can still get my 6x in instead of my 10x that I would get with these 4 picks, right? So $50 would turn into $500 without insurance here, and the 4 picks would turn into $300 if I just turn on insurance, with one wrong, which isn't bad. It's still a pretty good return. That's still a 6x return right now, right there. I like Austin Eckler's as well, man. Denver has actually given up almost 100 rushing yards to running backs on the ground on average. They've given up the second most yards per carry to running backs too. And since we know that he's kind of prolific in the receiving game, just a little bit, I kind of like the higher on his scrimmage yards of 102.5. And he's gone over that obviously over the past couple weeks. So I think I'm going to add that to this entry as well. So there's a lot of hires here.
Yeah.
But this $50, if I get all of these right, would turn into $1,000. It would be a 20x return. If I turn on insurance here, which allows me to get one of these wrong, it'll turn into $500. So not bad. So looking over at the Mike Williams one, 70.5 receiving yards is the over under. He's been getting it done over the past couple weeks, but this is a little bit of a tough matchup, right? I might leave this one alone. Because we've seen him go up and down. This could be one of those down weeks just because of the tough matchup. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that one alone. So yeah, these are the ones that I would probably go with here. Maybe, if I'm feeling risky, I might not turn on insurance. But if I want to try to, do my best to secure a bag tonight, I might just turn it on and I can still win some money. So yeah, now if you use the code Upper Hand on Underdog Fantasy, you'll get your first deposit doubled up to $100. And if you like any of these other pick'ems, I suggest you go for it. These are the ones that I like, and one of them that Zach likes for tonight.
Yeah.
But like I mentioned, there are plenty to choose from. So you can use the code Upper Hand on Underdog. You can find the link in the description of the podcast or on YouTube. So yeah, just wanted to kind of talk about that real quick before we get into the preview. I'm sorry, the reviews, the review of Sunday. So let's go ahead and do that.
Let's do it.
Now, Marquise Brown, dude. Marquise Brown, he was helped off the field with either a foot sprain or an ankle sprain. These are the 2 possible injuries that, these injury experts are labeling this as. He did have negative x-rays, but it seems like the MRI will likely reveal something we don't necessarily want to hear. I think him being helped off the field like he was, can't be great. He could hardly put pressure on that foot, which wasn't good. And I'm not a doctor. I have no idea what happened here, but I'd expect to be without Hollywood for a little bit. We'll obviously get more details on the injury hopefully today. But yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, he's set to be back this Thursday. Cliff Kingsbury says that, hopefully he'll be able to play. But I would assume, and apparently he's in phenomenal shape. So I'm assuming that he's going to play, especially with Hollywood out. So if Marquise Brown is out for you, I think you have more targets available for a guy like Rondale Moore. So I think he would benefit in terms of getting more targets while Hollywood is out. I know we were talking about this last week. When Hopkins does come back, these targets are going to have to be split between, Hopkins, Hollywood, Ertz, Rondale Moore. So Moore could have got the shit end of the stick here. But now that Hollywood might be out for a little bit, we don't know how long.
Yeah.
He could benefit with some extra targets.
And we actually saw a little bit of that extra targets, of the extra targets going Rondale Moore's way yesterday. If you watch the game a little bit, it seemed like Rondale Moore was always getting the ball thrown his way. He finished with a respectable stat line. What was it? Almost 11 points, 10.9 I'm looking at right now. Yeah. 6 catches, 49 yards. That's fine, I think, for right now. With Marquise Brown out, Rondale Moore, I think, has a chance to kind of slide right into a Marquise Brown role, or at least the role Marquise Brown would have played when DeAndre Hopkins was coming back. Obviously, you're feeling a little sour. We talked about Marquise Brown maybe being a bye last week on the pod. So, you can't really project injuries, and that sucks. So that's a little bit tough. But I like DeAndre Hopkins coming back. I think that he's going to be in a good spot moving forward. The fantasy gods giveth DeAndre Hopkins, they taketh away Marquise Brown. So we'll see how that goes. I like both DeAndre Hopkins and Rondale Moore moving forward. It's too bad we're not going to see the full complement of the Cardinals pass catchers on the field with Kyler Murray, especially with the offense looking the way it has. They haven't been very dynamic, and it seems like at times Kyler Murray's struggling. Having all those weapons would have helped, but it might be a few weeks. Hopefully this isn't anything serious, but I think you're right on the money when you say that, Marquise Brown, we might be looking at a couple of weeks without him.
Yeah, Rondale Moore, like you said, like 26% target share, same as Marquise Brown, same as Zach Ertz. So, without Hollywood in the lineup, I would assume that he sees, higher than a 20% target share. His targets won't be as downfield as Marquise Brown's were, but this is a very basic type of offense. And, he's, I wouldn't worry about that. He's going to get a lot of his targets in short to intermediate. That's okay. As long as you play in a PPR league, he would be preferred.
Yeah.
Now, this whole game, the Seahawks Cardinals game, was not the highest scoring game that was advertised, right?
Yeah.
The Cardinals are terrible, dude. Cliff Kingsbury is just like, he just gets on my nerves now. Like, he's like, I was all over Pete Carroll before, but Pete Carroll wasn't like the designer of the offense. In this case, like Cliff Kingsbury is like the designer of the offense, and like he has to do something. He has to go. It's bad.
Yeah.
And I personally don't put the blame on Kyler Murray. He hasn't looked good. He hasn't looked great, but I don't put this on him. Like, the offense is designed like in such a basic way that it's easy for defenses to kind of know what they're going to do,
Right.
But looking at their backfield, Eno Benjamin, he was on the field for 87% of snaps. He got 17 opportunities. It only amounted to 9.5 fantasy points. But if James Conner ends up being out again this Thursday, I'd start Eno again as an RB2. I wouldn't get discouraged with the lack of fantasy points because the usage is what you want to see. It just didn't turn into fantasy points this week. He got all the goal line work too. So he'll likely be a high-end RB2 start for me, honestly, once again on Thursday night, if Conner misses again against the Saints.
And, that's a weird thing because you say, like, this type of workload and going into this matchup, we thought if Eno Benjamin got this kind of workload, he'd really be a really nice piece for your team this week. But you're like you said, he got the workload. It didn't translate to fantasy points. But I don't really hold it against him, like you said, because that usage is there. The game overall was like super weird. We thought this was going to be like one of the highest scoring games, one of the most offensive centric games, fantasy conducive, and nobody produced in that game outside of really Kenneth Walker. Everybody else underperformed. I'm not worried about Eno Benjamin, as long as James Conner is out. If James Conner comes back, then yeah, I would, think about maybe not having Eno Benjamin in my lineup. But are the Cardinals on a short week? They're playing Thursday? Yeah. So there's probably a good chance that James Conner will miss Thursday. They'll give him the full time to rest until they play in week 8. Or do they have a bye? I'm not sure. It'll be a long rest for James Conner. He'll likely be back, if not this week, the next week. But Eno Benjamin could be a nice play for you on Thursday night. Definitely.
I think so. It's the Saints, but I would still play him. I wouldn't overthink it on this one. He 87% snap share. That usually leads to fantasy points.
Right.
But Kenneth Walker, man. Kenneth Walker, does he look like the real deal? Does he look like the real deal or what?
Yeah.
Like he looks good, man.
He looks like Rashad Penny on steroids. It's actually hilarious. Not size wise, but the way that he runs, it's just awesome. And even he had a couple negative runs. If you watch the game, like he had a couple of bad runs and he still showed out with a nice, fancy finish. He had two burst plays that really, he just went down the field. The big playability, we saw it right there. He actually got a little passing work too, which is nice. Clearly they handed the keys to Kenneth Walker. I was wondering maybe if they'd have any of the complimentary backs in. They didn't. So it's all signs are pointing up for Kenneth Walker. And like we said, he was going to be a league winner. It looks like that's the way it's going to be moving forward.
And this is what I've been saying, right? Like in his first NFL start, he's showing these skills off, and he does look like he is a special talent as a runner, right? 21 carries, 97 yards, and a touchdown. It could have been more. 69%, of snaps in a positive game script, 24 opportunities. He has 8 catches this year, which is only 5. And if he only gets 5 more catches on the year, it'll be more than what he had in his entire 2021 season at Michigan State. But if you drafted Kenneth Walker and you held him or you picked him up off of waivers, it looks like you got yourself a league-winning running back.
Yeah, 100%. And you look at Kenneth Walker, and the one thing that I know you noted, and I'm not sure I saw it in your notes, was that and I agreed, was the balance that he has, bouncing off tacklers and that kind of thing.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
the thing that really stood out to me. He has the speed. You could say any running back has the speed and that kind of thing, but the way he's able to bounce off tacklers and just stay upright, that's huge. It reminds me a little bit of what Dameon Pierce is doing, with the broken tackles, that kind of thing. Both of them have very good balance, but Kenneth Walker, like you said, he looks like the real deal. That balance is what stood out to me too.
Contact balance, that stop and go. Like the stop and go is legit, and his change of direction too. He showed all of those skills in this game yesterday, and I was just so happy to see it because when I saw his tape in Michigan State, I'm just like, yo, this dude can be so good. I hope it translates, and it seems like he just like took his first start and he's like, all right, that's it, man. I'm gonna kill it now. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being the best overall runner out of this draft class, and that's including Breece Hall. So super encouraging to see that. Outside of Walker, though, it was a down fantasy day for Geno Smith in the passing offense. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, they weren't able to come through. These days are going to happen, right? Like we can't expect them to just light it up every single week. But obviously keep starting those guys, keep starting Geno. He didn't throw a pick, he didn't make too many mistakes. But it's one of those situations where the game that we were all expecting to go crazy just didn't end up going crazy, but continue to start your Seahawks.
Yeah.
Falcons 49ers. That was a surprising outcome as well. Atlanta beating San Francisco 28-14. Brandon Aiyuk, getting it done on everyone's benches.
Yeah.
8 catches, 83 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Shout out to you if you had Aiyuk in your lineup. But this is the Aiyuk that we were kind of hyping up for, right, in the preseason. Like we know he has the talent. You just kind of need him to get those targets, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of hovering at like 5-6 targets a game, but when you give him 10 targets, he's going to get it done for you. He has after the catch ability, he has route running ability, he has it all. But this offense, is not a pass first offense, unfortunately. Now, when they were forced to become a little pass heavy in this game, they didn't quite show the sense of urgency early enough. That's why they lost the game. But Aiyuk got 10 targets. Kittle got 10 targets. I think all these guys got 10 targets. Debo as well. Kittle finally came through on a negative game script, 8 for 83 on 10 targets. I don't expect all these guys to get 10 targets every week because normally their defense comes through. The defense was pretty banged up coming into this game. Something I probably should have noted a little bit more, but it's not like it mattered for these Falcons pass catchers. Marcus Mariota ended up having a huge fantasy day. 3 total touchdowns, one of them on the ground. One of his passing touchdowns to Kyle Pitts. Huge day for Kyle Pitts. 3 catches for 19 yards and a touchdown. I'll take it. I hope you can sense the sarcasm. I'm trying.
If you start Kyle Pitts, you're happy. You've had him all season. You got a touchdown. That was just. It's not anything fantastic. Certainly not. But it's much better than what we've seen from him before. I don't know if you saw Steve's story on Fantasy Guides. He put that I think my sleeper app is glitching. It's just Kyle Pitts got a touchdown.
I didn't see that. That's hilarious.
That was hilarious. I thought that was funny. But you talk about Marcus Mariota. He had a good day. It wasn't a huge day, but it was a near perfect performance stat wise. He was extremely efficient. 13 of 14, only 14 passes, 13 completions, 2 touchdowns off of those, and a rushing touchdown. That was one of the biggest surprise performances for me. Just Mariota against the 49ers defense. Even though they're banged up, they are a good defense. I actually picked up Desmond Ridder in the one league, hoping that maybe this would be a spot where we'd see Desmond Ridder maybe come in, as a stash, but it doesn't look like that was the case. It looks like Mariota might have the starting job locked down a little bit longer than I anticipated.
Yeah. One good thing to note about these Falcons pass catchers, Pitts ran a route on 82% of dropbacks. Drake London, despite him not performing, good call, by the way, by you on the bench recommendation there last week, Zach. But London did run a route on 100% of dropbacks. So some positivity there, where I think the week before it was only like 65%, which wasn't great. So like, at least these guys are running a route when they're supposed to be running routes. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Rhamondre Stevenson came through as the overall RB2 on the week so far. 24 opportunities, 91 total yards, 2 touchdowns, 86% of snaps. That's what you want to see. This is probably like the first time I've ever seen Bill Belichick play a guy as a bell cow. Like, last
Yeah.
week, Stevenson got all the work because, he was actually the only running back active outside of Damian Harris, believe it or not. So it's like, okay, I get it. Bill Belichick is going with the only guy he got. But coming into this game, he knew that Damian Harris was going to be out. He had two other running backs active, but Stevenson still got 86% of the snap, 86% of snaps, excuse me.
Yeah.
But I guess Belichick seems to love this guy.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. There was a bunch of hype over the offseason surrounding Rhamondre Stevenson. Like, we were wondering if he'd be able to get a workload even with Damian Harris out, but now he's just capitalizing with Damian Harris out. Rhamondre Stevenson, he put up, 25 points, like, to my chagrin, because of course I was playing against him this week with you having him in your lineup. But he looked awesome. This isn't a situation where, other guys are rotating in and taking like touches that would be valuable. Rhamondre Stevenson got all of them. Pierre Strong was afterthought. Kevin Harris was an afterthought. The offense ran pretty much through Rhamondre Stevenson, and suddenly, Bailey Zappi, he's looking like he's doing pretty good. We knew that he'd be targeting Rhamondre Stevenson a lot. He did catch 4 balls, but the Patriots offense as a whole looks good. A lot better than I thought maybe it would be, which, will only raise Rhamondre Stevenson's stock.
I will, listen, man, I was talking a lot of shit about Bailey Zappi. I owe this man an apology, okay? Because the dude looks better than much better than I thought. I saw him at the Senior Bowl, and it's funny, right? Like a lot of these guys that like Romeo Doubs, right? Bailey Zappi.
Yeah.
Who else? Who else was there that didn't impress? Alec Pierce. These guys weren't really like super. Didn't stand out. Alec Pierce stood out a little bit in the first day, and then I think they just decided to like take him out because he didn't need he did enough apparently that scouts and stuff were saying that he looks really good, so they kind of took him out to avoid any negative press. But Bailey Zappi didn't look amazing or anything like that, so it's good. It's kind of where I got my info from, just watching him firsthand. Same thing with Romeo Doubs. But good for these guys, man. I'm happy that they're able to contribute. It's funny. I saw a stat. I think Red Zone showed the stat, right, of these rookie Patriots quarterbacks going on the road in their first start and getting the W, right?
Yeah.
So Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Bailey Zappi. Oh no, I'm sorry. It wasn't Jacoby Brissett. It was Jimmy Garoppolo, Bailey Zappi, and Mac Jones. It was those 3 guys all getting the W on the road. But interesting stuff there. Now, on the Patriots side, Tyquan Thornton, who was their second-round rookie wide receiver, who was banged up to start the year, he was the Patriots' second-round pick. So we got to keep that in mind when we're talking about his overall production. Part of the reason why they drafted him is because of the serious speed that he has. And he scored 2 touchdowns in this game. 1 on the ground, 1 through the air. He had a couple of carries in this game. So it seems like they look at him as like a versatile player. He's coming off the injury now, and it seems like he's going to be pretty involved in their offense, especially now that Kendrick Bourne, he suffered what seemed like a toe injury right now. So we'll see how serious that is. Nelson Aguilar has a hamstring injury, so there might be some extra opportunity for someone like Thornton. I wouldn't be spending up on waivers or anything like that, but he has some appeal, as someone who, produced, number 1, with opportunity, and number 2 was a second-round pick.
Yeah. So he has a draft capital, and now he's in a spot where he can actually contribute. It looks like he's not going to be getting like, plain old wide receiver usage either. It looks like they're interested in giving him the ball on the ground a little bit. Obviously, it's a very small sample size, but he can add an extra layer to the offense where it's not going to be just Bailey Zappi dropping back and throwing the ball. They can get a little gadget play here and there. I like Tyquan Thornton as a waiver wire, like you said. I wouldn't go spending all of my fab or really even that much. I think I'd cap out at 3-4% of the fab.
Makes sense.
But we'll probably talk about him maybe tomorrow on tomorrow's episode for the waivers. But he's not a priority ad, but he did have a nice performance. Chances are, I don't think Tyquan Thornton was probably not in any lineups. I mean, I can't imagine one, even in deep leagues. He's pretty much off the radar. So this one just kind of popped up out of nowhere, and good for him.
Yeah,
but
and to be honest, like it wouldn't have, because he really didn't get much opportunity until Kendrick Bourne got hurt. Kendrick Bourne was starting in 3 wide receiver sets, and that's when Thornton really got his opportunity. So just keep that in mind. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones should be picked up in leagues at this point if he's not already, especially in deeper leagues. He has 2 70-plus receiving yard games over his last 3. He has 4 50-plus yard receiving games out of 5 this year. So if you need wide receiver help during the bye weeks, I think he can help you hold it down. And that's considering, Jacoby Myers has David Njoku, he has Amari Cooper, but, the DPJ has got it done also for the most part. And it's possible that he has even more upside when Deshaun Watson is back. There is some room for upside there because he is their starting wide receiver opposite Amari Cooper. And at times he's been getting a decent target share. So he's somebody that is interesting. He's always been interesting to me since his rookie year because he showed a lot of flashes. So if you're in a deeper league and if he's available, I think he's a possible pickup. Hunter Henry is a waiver wire pickup as well for anyone who needs a tight end, not just because he had a good fantasy day, 4 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown, but he ran a route on 81% of dropbacks this week, and that was with JuJu Smith active. But we've seen this before, okay, where that route participation like drops out of nowhere. Like it goes up, it goes down with Hunter Henry. So he'd be one of the targets for me if I need a tight end, but like it's super volatile. His situation is super volatile. I wouldn't expect it to stay where it is. But if he does end up 80% or above on a consistent basis, I think he could end up being a top 12 fantasy tight end pretty easily.
Yeah, that bar for being a top 12 fantasy tight end is very low right now.
It is. Top 10.
Yeah.
The Jaguars, they're still holding Travis Etienne back a little bit from taking too much of the running back share. James Robinson out-carried Etienne 12-10, but Etienne is the one who ended up with the production. He had 108 total yards and 12 touches. That's 2 straight games now with limited touches for the most part, but 100 yards from scrimmage. The dude is explosive, right? He had a couple big plays in this game. He's still just a low-end RB2 for now, but that should increase as his touches start to go up. I would expect those touches to eventually start to go up, hopefully, because every time he touches the ball, I feel like he's just ready to explode, right? They did have a couple carries go here and there, which I'm just like, why? Just give those touches to Etienne. It's like you just get more bang for your buck at that point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I was actually playing against, you had Travis Etienne in your lineup too. I was playing against him. I could tell that you were probably fuming the way they were using him because every time he touched the ball, he was getting a ton of yards and it's like producing huge for it, but he only touched the ball, was it 12 times? So it's like, that's not anywhere near enough. You look at the production compared to the touches. It's like, it wasn't like, oh, he's being boosted by one big play. He did have that one run, but there were plenty of other runs where it's like 6, 7, 8 yards on the ground. You're moving fast. I can't believe they didn't give him the ball anymore than they did. I'd expect the backfield to shift more towards Travis Etienne and moving forward. I thought that maybe would have happened yesterday. It didn't really happen, which is disappointing. But I like Travis Etienne moving forward. Definitely. You talk about a couple carries where they should have just given it to Travis Etienne. How about Trevor Lawrence freaking sneaking 2 touchdowns in for 2 rushing touchdowns? If one of those goes to Travis Etienne, we're having a completely different conversation. I was frustrated, just as a fantasy player, seeing Trevor Lawrence sneaking those touchdowns in.
I know, man. The Jaguars are losing too, man. They're 2-4 now.
Yeah,
they got to start giving the ball to Travis Etienne more. Like he is the playmaker that it can change their offense. And that decision has to be made at some point. I know they want to split up the carries and all that, but listen, like you don't need to give. What's his name? Who had that long touchdown run? JaMychal Hasty had like 1 touch in that game. One touch goes for a long ass touchdown. Anyone could have ran through that hole. Like if Etienne ran through that hole, he would have been there 5 minutes before Hasty got to the end zone. So I don't know, man. It's gonna happen soon. I'm not being super impatient about it. We know it's gonna happen because the talent is evident and he's having big games, 200-yard games from scrimmage over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Michael Pittman, another guy, reminded everybody, why he's that dude. 13 catches for 134 yards on 16 targets. He came through big time. What did you think of Michael Pittman's performance?
I think it was reassuring for fantasy owners who have watched him kind of not perform very well the past few weeks. I think he hasn't had very much production at all. He hasn't had a touchdown since week 1.
Yeah.
And, he's been kind of making his living in PPR. And he's been all right for you if you're playing PPR. Not very good for you if you're not playing PPR. But this was a much better performance. This was actually, I think, his second best performance of the season behind week 1. You like to see it. It looks like the Colts offense isn't as bad as we might have thought it was going to be. The first few weeks in the season, Matt Ryan looked a little bit more like Matt Ryan yesterday. It was a vintage performance. He turned back the clock a little bit there. I don't know if that's going to be sustainable and continue to happen every week, but he's going into a pretty good stretch right now of games. The next 2 games are against Tennessee and Washington. It's all positive outlook for Michael Pittman right now, and you're really happy if you had him in your lineup. You should have this week against Jacksonville.
Yeah, he moved to like the RB7. He moved to like RB wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game just off of that performance.
Right.
Which is super interesting. That tells you what you need to know as far as like a lot of wide receivers underperforming this year.
Mm-hmm.
Deon Jackson in relief of Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. He had 12 carries on the ground for 42 yards and a touchdown. But the real story was that he caught all 10 of his targets for 79 yards.
That was huge.
Yeah. He was the RB1 on the week so far. And I would assume that
it should stay that way.
Nothing's going to happen tonight.
Unless Austin Eckler, goes crazy. But I don't know if that's going to happen. He's had 2 really good weeks in a row. I don't know if 3's going to happen.
It can happen. Eckler can take the crown. He can. But yeah, no, he did suffer a quad injury, Deon Jackson, at the end of the game. So Jonathan Taylor might be starting over him if he misses time. I'm kidding. It's probably over for Deon Jackson, the Deon Jackson experiment at this point. But I really appreciate his commitment, to getting it done for fantasy football managers everywhere. It's also possible that Jackson's quad injury isn't serious, and it's possible that JT is out again next week.
Mm-hmm.
If it's really a high ankle sprain. So I wouldn't drop Jackson until he has an injury that's going to keep him out a couple weeks, right? Or B, we know that JT has a full practice this week. Like once JT has a full practice, I'm like, all right, cool. I can probably drop Jackson. And a lot of people didn't pick him up. He's still available in a bunch of waiver wires. So tomorrow, when waivers, I'm going to be putting in some claims for Deon Jackson just in case the injury isn't that bad. Maybe we'll find out about the injury today, maybe earlier tomorrow before waivers run. But you just kind of monitor that situation a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't go crazy, with Deon Jackson. Like you said, I think
no.
This is the extent of his production. They have Nyheim Hines. He should be coming back and getting healthier soon enough. Even though Deon Jackson really did well, he is buried on the depth chart. Once the other 2 guys come back, Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor, there's no reason to think that he's going to be seeing significant time unless either of them get hurt again.
You don't think he plays over Jonathan Taylor?
No, maybe.
Oh,
maybe. It's an outside chance. But I don't think so.
All right. Well, we got Paris Campbell coming out of nowhere with 11 targets. He caught 7 for 57 and a touchdown. I brought that up because I'm a Paris Campbell stan. Alec Pierce, he wasn't having a great game until he caught the game-winning 32-yard touchdown. He came through for you at the end. If you had to start him in a pinch off of waivers, because he was one of the bigger waiver wire ads last week at wide receiver. So if you did, put him in your lineup, because you had to, it worked out.
Yeah.
Dalvin Cook ended this game with this Vikings game with only 14 touches, but he got it done with the big 53-yard touchdown. He was pretty quiet otherwise, but one positive, though, is that he was on the field for 87% of snaps, which is a big jump from where he was the last 2 weeks. So hopefully that continues if you have Cook. If you have him, that's a great sign that he's back to a workhorse, bell cow type of snap share. They didn't run a ton of plays in this game that could have contributed to it. Maybe if they were going to be running a lot of plays, then Dalvin Cook could have seen like a bigger share, with Alexander Madison, but didn't happen. So this is encouraging moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Compared to what we've been seeing, with the snap shares, like you said, it looked a little bit like it looked dangerously close to a committee, last week, definitely. And now this week it's looking a little bit better. The Dalvin Cook, I think that he just has to get the touches and he'll be fine. It seems they haven't given him the touches they used to get, and he's been a little bit less efficient than he was in the past few seasons. But I think Dalvin Cook is still a pretty solid RB1 moving forward. There's no reason to think that.
We just haven't seen that ceiling from him. We also haven't seen him really involved in the passing game that much. The first couple of weeks, he had some receptions and some targets, but since then, he hasn't really been too involved. And I'm looking for that to kind of increase for him to really maximize, where we were drafting him at, which is like, first round running back. We want you to be involved in the passing game a little bit more. And not just be like an early down plotter. What I'm saying?
And you talked about drafting him, pretty high. And we talked about it over the offseason for a long time. It's like he has the chance to get injured and that kind of thing, but we know what the upside is, and he hasn't gotten to that point yet. And they did say over the offseason, I saw reports somewhere that the Vikings were going to use him more in the passing game, or they planned or they wanted to use Dalvin Cook more in the passing game. That it hasn't come to fruition. Only 5 targets the last 3 weeks total. So, I think if that goes up, you're right. Dalvin Cook could definitely see more production, but until then, he's still a solid RB1. I just don't like him as like the overall RB1 on a weekly basis. I don't think that upside's there.
Right. You know who does have the upside for overall wide receiver 1 though? Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle with Teddy Bridgewater in this game. 12 for 177 for Tyreek. 6 for 129 for Waddle. These two guys are really, really good. And Mike McDaniel is looking like a mastermind right now. It's also worth noting that Mike Gesicki ran a route on 76% of dropbacks. And, that might be exciting because he did have those 2 touchdowns. And he did his version of the gritty.
Oh, yeah.
All the way down to the sideline. Just kind of just funny. And you can pick up Gesicki with that route participation going up, but just keep in mind that Durham Smith, who is a guy who has been like limiting Gesicki all year because he's sharing that role with him. Smith, he can be back this week because he was limited in practice all week this past week. So if he's back, that could bring Gesicki down a little bit, and then he might be unstartable again. Just keep that in mind. But it also looks like Tua is going to be back next week. He passed a concussion protocol. He's out of the protocol at this point, so he should be back. But it doesn't matter. Like these 2 wide receivers just getting it done.
Yeah, 100%. And this has to be the most talented, the most electric wide receiver duo in the NFL right now, I think. I don't think there's anyone doing it better.
I think electric, like the most electric duo, like that hands down is these 2.
Yeah. Like Tyreek Hill is producing, as long as he had a quiet game, Skylar Thompson, but he seems like matchup proof and quarterback proof. He might be the safest.
He went from
bet.
Patrick Mahomes to like Teddy Bridgewater, and like he's playing better.
Yeah. Well, he's getting 15 targets, starting at 177 yards. If he had a touchdown, it would have been an even bigger day. Tyreek Hill, like I said, he might have one of the best floors in fantasy right now, even though, he had the one game. I forget what game it was. It was a couple weeks ago. It was against, who else? Buffalo. It was a quiet game against Buffalo's defense. You can't really fault him for that. Outside of that, he's been awesome for you. Tyreek Hill, his ceiling is so high with a really nice floor, regardless of who's quarterback. Tyreek Hill is my main takeaway. Jaylen Waddle, he did really good too. But it's clear that if they're favoring somebody in the passing game, if they're going to favor one over the other, it's going to be Tyreek Hill. They're both very similar in value, but Tyreek Hill has a little bit more of an edge. I love both of them moving forward, though. It's just awesome.
Waddle was a great buy coming into this week, but that buy window has closed.
Right.
Joe Burrow, he walks into the Superdome with a game-worn Ja'Marr Chase LSU jersey. And for those who don't know, some people might not, Burrow and Chase won the national championship at LSU. They're back in Louisiana for this game. So it's kind of like a homecoming.
In the very stadium I think they played in, right?
Yeah. Burrow then proceeds to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, runs in a touchdown, and gets Ja'Marr Chase to 7 catches for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's some boss shit right there.
Yeah. It's just crazy. The story, like, how did we not see this coming? I just can't believe it. We had Ja'Marr Chase ranked as wide receiver 11. It's funny. We just talked about that last week. He said it's his first time being outside the top 10 for us. And then he walks in and go home to LSU and they just go crazy. GEAUX.
Who are 2 guys that we had ahead of him who didn't come through?
Oh, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf.
Yep.
It's just crazy.
Crazy how this works.
Yeah, we should have seen the storyline coming, but good to see the Bengals offense look back on track. It looked like the Bengals offense of old. Jamar Chase, breaking tackles and running for long gains. Joe Burrow, he actually got into the ground game and ran the touchdown and four total touchdowns. Are the Bengals back? Is the Bengals offense back? It was the Saints. Granted, it was the Saints. They're a decent matchup. Is the Bengals offense back?
I think so. I mean, after this performance, like Joe Burrow came into this game as confident as any quarterback could. I mean, he was wearing the damn jersey coming into the game. Like he's like, "Hey, man, this is who I'm throwing it to. I'm letting you know who I'm throwing it to. I'm letting you know who's going to have a big game today, and we're going to get it done." And he got it done.
Yeah,
That's
telegraphed it.
Cool Joe. Cool
Joe
Joe.
Cool. Joe Cool. Yeah.
Joe Cool. That's what it is, right? Not Cool Joe.
Yeah, Joe Shiesty.
Joe Shiesty.
Also, big game for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, but Joe Mixon also had a good game too. I mean, it was solid for what
it was solid. It was solid.
The way the game was going.
We were talking about buying Joe Mixon last week. After you got that touchdown or receiving touchdown, I think you're happy that you bought him if you did.
Yeah.
J.K. Dobbins had some tightness in his knee. Didn't play the second half. Could be related to a soft tissue injury, maybe a hamstring. Hopefully, it's nothing related to the ACL. It might be though, right? But Kenyon Drake ended up going off in this game. He was the only other running back to get a touch in this game outside of Dobbins. So if Dobbins can't go next week, I think Drake would be in consideration. Just keep in mind that this backfield keeps shuffling. Justice Hill didn't play yesterday because of a hamstring injury that he had himself. He had 2 limited practices last week, so he might end up playing this upcoming week. If that's the case, like I'm kind of like hands off on this backfield. If Justice Hill's out, maybe I'll consider Drake as like a upside flex play, maybe against a vulnerable Browns rushing defense. Gus Edwards, he's going to be back at some point in the next couple of weeks. He's a solid prospective add if he's still available on waivers. Obviously you want to temper expectations on him, like in his first couple of games back, because he's taking a little while to recover from that ACL injury himself. But Gus Edwards, man, like, we did, and I'm not saying that, we saw an injury coming or anything like that. It's just like we saw like a ceiling and an opportunity to sell after his 2 touchdown game a few weeks ago. And I'm hoping that you guys did, because like now, if he's out for a couple of weeks, it's like, he becomes a little bit of a roster clogger, on your fantasy bench. So hoping J.K. Dobbins is fine. But we'll get more on that, and hopefully it's not like any sort of injury that will keep him sidelined for a couple weeks.
Right, and I was avoiding the Ravens backfield really even before any of the injuries went down or anything like that. I wasn't too sure J.K. Dobbins were going to be able to produce, even though it is a run-first offense. They have Lamar Jackson there, and they have a couple other guys that they give the ball to. Now moving forward, I'm even more inclined to just take my hands off. I might not even think, I might treat it as if the Baltimore backfield doesn't exist. The Baltimore backfield is Lamar Jackson. That's it for right now. You can, I want to say, you might want to say, Kenyon Drake, he might be a good pickup. He did nothing in other games. Like, this is the only game where he really looked good. It's hard to say that, he's going to be their guy moving forward. Like you said, it's always shuffling, and it's always another guy, one guy in, another guy out. Mike Davis, he's there too. He just didn't get a touch. There's just so many question marks in this backfield that you can't really trust it unless you're in really, really bad shape at running back. There's no reason to be starting any of these guys. I personally, for me, I'm not starting anybody. If J.K. Dobbins is out, if J.K. Dobbins plays, then, I will start him, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to be out. So I'm not starting any Ravens running backs.
Zach is anti-Ravens running backs. We can see that.
I love the Ravens team. Just the running backs, right. No, not for fantasy.
Now, Wan'Dale Robinson, we talked about him a ton, right? Just this year in general. But he ended up catching a touchdown this game. In his first game of his career, he only ran 11 routes in his first game, and he was targeted on 4 of those routes at a 36% rate. So that's what you want to see. Hope you picked him up already, but he's definitely worth a pickup this week going forward.
Yeah, and if you were listening to the podcast the whole offseason, you would have maybe had him stashed.
Or if you just listened to it last week,
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
listened
yeah.
to us last week or the week before, whatever. Anyway,
Right.
Daniel Bellinger, another tight end worth taking a look at on the Giants. If you don't know who he is, he's a tight end for the Giants. Rookie, 4th-round pick, I think. He ran a route on 81% of dropbacks. He caught 5 for 38 and a touchdown. He's worth a look if you're struggling at the position because it is possible that he ends up being their main pass catching tight end, and this route participation is exactly what you want. So if that continues, something to keep an eye on because he seems like a potentially talented pass catching tight end.
Right.
The Steelers beating the Bucs is one game I did not see going the way it did. Okay, Tom Brady, not absolutely destroying the Steelers' banged up secondary is not something that I saw coming. Chris Godwin came through, 6 for 95, but Mike Evans only 4 for 42. I would assume there was some double teaming going on there, but I have to take a look at the tape, when it comes to that. But this was surprising. Somebody could like clip up what I just said like over the past like 15 seconds and it could be totally out of context. But this was surprising to me just overall. Like Brady looked like he was kind of struggling the entire game. Lost a fumble, like he just wasn't comfortable. So it was interesting to see. Now Leonard Fournette, on the other hand, he's back in a workhorse role, right? 82% of snaps, ran about on 71% of dropbacks. It seems like he has taken the job back completely. 27 opportunities too in week 6. Rachaad White, he is basically a handcuff at this point. He got a couple targets in this game, but at this point, this is Fournette show.
Yeah. And I said about this last week. I think we talked about this. I said Rachaad White, he is just a handcuff at this point, and that the usage was there for Leonard Fournette. That made me think that, he's the clear RB1 there. And that's what we saw more of. Even in a game script where they were behind the whole game, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Steelers led wire to wire, which is really, really weird to think about. I thought this was going to be a completely different game. Obviously, if you have Leonard Fournette, you're okay with the outcome because he did end up producing for you. Leonard Fournette did get 21 carries. The thing about it was Pittsburgh, even though they led the whole game, I think it was, they were never far ahead to the point where they abandoned the run game. Leonard Fournette got 21 carries still. Only 63 yards to show for it, but he did come through with the passes going his way, 6 catches and a touchdown through the air. I like Leonard Fournette moving forward. Solid RB1 guaranteed with RB1 overall upside, I think, each week.
Yeah.
Definitely 100%. And Rachaad White, like I said, he's just a handcuff at this point.
You got to hold him, though. Don't drop him.
Yeah, no.
Do not drop Rachaad White, okay?
Yeah.
I get it. It was discouraging, like whatever. But like his upside was always if Fournette were to get hurt, right? Like he was an RB3, at best, playable. But he wasn't like what his role was yesterday. He's not. That's not a playable type of role. So weeks 4 and 5, they were coming into week 6. What we saw in week 6, it wasn't. So don't drop them. You got to hold guys like this because these are the type of guys that you would spend 100% of your fab on if they become available.
Yeah, with Rachaad White too. If you're looking for a silver lining, if you maybe started Rachaad White, hoping for him to have that receiving upside, long-term silver lining here. It was 4th and 1. Instead of handing the ball to Fournette or passing the ball to Fournette, they threw the ball to Rachaad White and he converted. That kind of shows me that they do trust him, in certain situations. Then that's going to tell me that if Leonard Fournette would go down or Leonard Fournette isn't getting it done on the ground, that they can turn to him, that they feel like they can trust him and that he can get some touches. I think that was my silver lining. Just that one play I saw.
Yeah.
But that's good news. They do trust him in key situations.
100%. Najee Harris, he ended up getting 17 opportunities to Jaylen Warren's 2 opportunities. Najee was on the field for 69% of snaps. Warren ate into his routes a bit, but nothing too significant. Najee did catch a wide open touchdown, but it's notable that he's holding off Warren for now. Even though he doesn't look great still, I think he's back in like the low end RB2 conversation once Kenny Pickett is back. And when I say that, I mean, he did suffer a concussion in this game. Mitch Trubisky ended up finishing the game and then ended up winning. But Kenny Pickett, he might end up missing a week here. I would hold off on really depending on my Steelers wide receivers until he's back. But we'll see what happens with Najee Harris. Like, it wasn't like overly encouraging, but the fact that he got some of his work back, we should take that. It's kind of like a Zeke type of role, right? It's kind of like he's not looking amazing, basically, but at least he's getting some work.
Although, I don't want to discount Zeke because he did have 80 yards on the ground last night and a touchdown.
I'd
So
take
he
that back.
didn't look that bad.
I'd take that back.
But
You're right.
with Najee Harris, you talk about him, take away the touchdown, and we're looking at another Najee Harris performance. So it's like I wasn't terribly encouraged, yesterday, but by what we saw. Regardless of who's at quarterback, I don't think his script is going to change. His role is pretty much cut out for him in this offense, and it's not one that's going to have any type of RB1 upside. I kind of have his ceiling, I think, is mid RB2, and that's if things are going absolutely right for him. I think low RB2 is where he's going to kind of settle at this point.
I think he's going to settle as a flex at some point. Just right now, I feel like he's at a low end RB2. I feel like it's kind of high for how he's looking right now.
It could be, yeah.
Darrell Henderson ended up with 71% of snaps, 15 opportunities without Cam Akers. This Rams backfield is just like an overall underwhelming backfield, right?
Yeah.
He did end up scoring. That's great. But by the way, and we didn't really talk about the Akers situation on the podcast because it kind of happened over the weekend.
It happened. I think it was like half an hour after we got off the podcast on Friday.
On Friday, that's right. That's right. So, it looks like the reports are that he has played his last down with the Rams, according to these reports, and they are trying to trade him. Like, if you ask me, I don't know what team would pay anything for Cam Akers. You never know. Like, I could be wrong, but I can't imagine him being worth giving up a pick for, even a late one, to be honest with you. Like, considering the the injury, right? Considering the fact that he's been ineffective this year, I don't know. I don't see it. I don't know what this whole thing was about. Maybe Sean McVay wanted to bench him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's my guess.
It's so weird because over the offseason they were hyping him up. That he's going to be, maybe one of the bigger guys in terms of, workload moving into the season. And it just never came to be. The first week was, obviously a red flag. He got a few more touches in other games, but he just hasn't looked like, I don't think he's gotten more than 5 yards on a carry. Like, he just has not been good. I wouldn't be surprised if he hits waivers, if they just outright release him.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Allen Robinson, he actually showed up in this game, man. 5 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown after we dropped his ass. Now the Rams are going into the bye. Then they have San Francisco, they have Tampa Bay, they have Arizona, and then they have New Orleans. So, still just a 19% target share this week, with the production, and 3 wide receivers not named Cooper Kupp hit that mark this week. So if you dropped Allen Robinson, I think it's okay that you dropped Allen Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is going to turn to any consistency or anything like that. He ended up having a good game. It seemed like all of his targets except one was in man coverage. There was one where Stafford kind of was on the run a little bit, and he found Allen Robinson in the zone, in an empty spot in the zone, which is great. And we talked about his splits between man and zone, and he's solid against man coverage. And we saw that amazing catch that he made on the sideline, right? Where super great body control and catching the ball with both feet inbounds. That's what Allen Robinson does really well. But most of the time, these teams are playing zone, and it's not going to be, we're going to see more of what we saw, I think, from weeks 1 through 5. I think, it was a real shift in the NFL towards zone this year. So not something that I anticipated. And because of that, Allen Robinson is not going to be able to do his thing. He's not going to reach what we thought he would reach going into this year.
No, you're right. I hear you. This is a lightning strike performance for me, in my opinion, for Allen Robinson. It's clear that he's not, some guy that they're looking to scheme, not only, throw to. Matthew Stafford isn't looking to throw to, but they're also not looking to scheme him open. It's going to be the Cooper Kupp show still moving forward. It is worth noting, Tyler Higbee only had 2 targets, which is weird by what we've seen.
Well, I can explain that one. I think what ended up happening was he was coming into the game a little bit banged up with that ankle injury. He was questionable going into the game, and he didn't run his full complement of routes.
That's true.
Yeah, Higbee only ran a route on 62% of dropbacks, where he's usually running a route on 90% plus. So, he wasn't there. He wasn't 100%. So hopefully he could bounce back next week.
Hopefully. But, Allen Robinson, like I said, I don't think this is going to be something that he's going to be able to stick to. He's going into the bye, at least on a high note. So maybe that offers you a low hope. Maybe that would be a reason to keep him, on your bench I don't know how many people
It's
have
kind
room
of
to
a
keep Allen
it's
Robinson
kind of
on
a
your bench.
blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah.
It's like you were looking forward to dropping him before his bye, and then he had to have this performance, and you're like, oh, do you have to hold this guy during the bye?
Yeah. It's as soon as the fantasy community just as a whole general gives up on him, he has this performance to be like, wait just 1 second. And he might have bought himself 2 more weeks on people's benches with that performance.
Oh man. It's I'm okay. Honestly, even after this performance, I'm okay dropping him.
Yeah.
If you had him on the bench, or maybe you start him, I don't know. You're desperate, you put him in. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like if you're thinking about dropping him and you because of somebody you need to pick up this week, I get it. Like it's fine. I think he'll be fine. Bills and Chiefs. That was a pretty good game.
Yeah.
It wasn't like crazy offensive, like firepower, but it was like solid.
Yeah, it was a good game. That's what it was.
It was a good game. Stephon Diggs killed it. Of course he would. Gabe Davis, he came through as we had hoped he would in this matchup. Might be a good time to take advantage of 2 good weeks and maybe sell if you can. I don't know. But I think, Zach, where you are on Gabe Davis is like, just leave him in your lineup. Leave him in your lineup. Just, embrace the volatility, right?
That's the way it has to be.
Right?
He has week winning upside every single week. And, this type of performance where he has 16 points, 3 catches, 74 yards, touchdown, like that's a middle ground that we don't usually have with him. So I'm actually like ecstatic over that too, because it seemed like he didn't have a middle ground the first few weeks. Now we see a little bit of middle ground. If he could get that, raise his floor just a little bit and still have that upside, just because Stephon Diggs had a big game, and Gabe Davis was relatively quiet. Gabe Davis still caught a touchdown. And I saw a post somewhere, I think it was CBS Sports, summed up Gabe Davis like perfectly. They called him the CEO of chunk yardage because it's like 90% or some percentage of his touches over 90%, somewhere in that range, go for either a first down or a touchdown. And it didn't change yesterday. He caught 2 first down passes and a touchdown pass. So his ceiling is so high. I don't think you can leave him out of your lineup. And honestly, if I have him, I wouldn't really consider trading him unless I'm getting King's ransom for him, because that is week winning upside every week. Just keep him in your lineup. Trust it. It'll happen.
Did you see what I just pinned to the screen?
Yeah, I did. I got that sleeper update too.
Robbie Anderson just got traded to the Cardinals. Crazy.
Definitely see this coming after what we saw on the sidelines yesterday.
Hollywood Brown gets hurt. Robbie Anderson is arguing with these coaches on the sideline. He gets sent to the locker room by his head coach, Steve Wilkes. And now he's traded to the Arizona Cardinals. It's looking like Hollywood Brown's injury is probably some significant, I would assume.
Yeah, that's what it has to be. If they feel the need to go out and get somebody, obviously, if they feel a need to go out and get somebody this quick, I wouldn't necessarily turn to Robbie Anderson as my, let's go get him. Like, he's talented, Maybe they're just looking for someone to fill that role of a deep threat right now, but I'm not sure. I wouldn't pay too much attention to Robbie Anderson as things stand right now with DeAndre Hopkins coming back.
Hey, listen, if Hollywood Brown's injury is somewhat significant, if he's going to be out for several weeks, I'm picking up Robbie Anderson. This is not a tough offense to learn. It's pretty easy.
Clearly.
I can learn it.
Yeah.
And Robbie Anderson, can be on the outside opposite DeAndre Hopkins and run that deep ball. He's still one of the best deep threats in the league, just that his quarterbacks couldn't find him. So I could see him complimenting DeAndre Hopkins pretty well on the outside. AJ Green doesn't really have it much anymore. I can see this working out. I can.
It could.
I'm
a little pessimistic about it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think Robbie Anderson's a good player. It's just that he doesn't have the quarterback to get him the ball, and I think in this situation with Kyler Murray, we saw what Kyler Murray was able to do with like a guy like Christian Kirk, going deep, right? He was able to make that work, and I think he can make it work with Robbie Anderson too. I think Robbie Anderson is a better deep threat. So that's an interesting one there. I can see that. I can see Robbie Anderson having a fantasy impact on the Cardinals, despite me not liking the Cardinals offense that much. There is some upside there. Okay. Awesome. Cool. That's cool that happened during the show.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the Chiefs and Bills real quick. And by the way, appreciate you, Z Ortiz. I was able to easily just pin that up there. Appreciate the heads up there. Devin Singletary, he ended up playing on 86% of snaps. As we expected that to happen in a close game, he saw 20 opportunities, came through as a solid RB2. Isaiah McKenzie did not have a full-time role in this game. Only 59% route participation. Khalil Shakir did run 9 routes himself, and McKenzie had a couple of missed opportunities in that game. He had a touchdown waiting for him. He ended up tripping, and it looked like it was a bad ball, but it was McKenzie's fault. He had a couple of drops as well, so not great. The door might be opening up a little bit for Shakir, or at least it's just like staying open for Shakir to continue to get some opportunities, because he ended up getting some in this game. So we'll see how that turns out. But McKenzie, he doesn't have that full-time role, so his rest of season outlook doesn't seem as high to me anymore as it did when Jamison Crowder first hurt that ankle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Isaiah McKenzie, we kind of had him. He was doing well. Like, don't get us wrong, he was doing well, but I'm not sure, like you said, about that role anymore. Especially, Gabe Davis is stepping up a little bit, being a little bit more consistent. I think is also hurting Isaiah McKenzie.
Now, on the Chiefs side, I hope you sold Clyde Edwards-Helaire a couple weeks ago when you could. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. JuJu, he was on our buy low list for a couple weeks. We kind of gave up last week because it was just like, ugh. But he didn't look healthy last week, to be honest with you. Now, he finally came through. He caught all 5 of his targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. I can understand wanting to sell after this performance. But I think he can be a wide receiver 3, with the type of upside that he showed in this game for you all year. You know what I mean? Like, he did look a lot healthier in this game last week. And also, like, there was a little rapport showing now between him and Mahomes, if you notice in this game. Like, back shoulder throw on the sideline, finding the open spot in the zone with Patrick Mahomes kind of scrambling a little bit. I liked what I saw from JuJu in this game outside of the big catch and run for the touchdown.
Yeah, I like it too. It's funny because I put this headline here together that there was a JuJu Smith-Schuster sighting. That's what it felt like, because he's been so quiet the rest of the season, so it was good to see it. One of the better pieces of fantasy news, I think, for, this season. JuJu Smith-Schuster, I wasn't sure if he would ever come through. It was starting to look like it wouldn't be the case, but it seems like, it was a marquee matchup, a big game. Mahomes is throwing to him. That's another thing, he's throwing to him in a big game in big spots, and he actually got it done. So hopefully maybe this is like a catalyst, and it'll up his production a little bit moving forward. They have a tough game against San Fran, but next week, but Atlanta just torched them, which I wasn't expecting at all. So maybe JuJu Smith-Schuster has a little bit more upside than we think heading into the matchup next week. I like him, like you said, as wide receiver 3 with upside.
This is not an Allen Robinson situation. Like, Robinson just wasn't getting the targets. Coming into this game, JuJu saw 8 targets.
In 4 out of 5
exactly games. 8 targets. Exactly 8 targets in 4 or 5 games coming into the game. So, like, he's going to get his targets, and coming from Patrick Mahomes, that's that's a plus.
Yeah.
All right, that's pretty much all I got. Thank you, Zach. Thanks to everybody who was listening to this podcast. Appreciate you guys. If you can rate and review the podcast, that would mean the world to us. Make sure to use code UpperHand when you sign up with Underdog Fantasy, so you can play with these. You can put these pick'ems in your entries and try to win some money. That's what we all trying to do out here. All right. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, live on YouTube for the Waiver Wire show for Week 7. See you later. Bye-bye.